Space is huge, really huge. It's really, 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 really huge. You could spend your entire life traveling in one direction at the speed of light and still never reach the edge. This is our solar system, the region around our sun dominated by its gravity. Today we'll be looking at each of the planets to see how well they align with predictions made by evolution. Our planets in order from the Sun are Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and we'll talk about Pluto too. Here's a picture for reference in sizes. You can fit 1.3 million Earths inside of the Sun. According to evolution, this is what our solar system used to look like. Assuming that our solar system is able to overcome many of the obstacles for young solar systems, we could expect the formation of planetesimals and eventually planets. During this stage of formation, there are hundreds, thousands, millions of impacts. Let's hope that a planetesimal doesn't come to ruin the party. As you may have predicted from the title of this video, we're going to discuss some of the anomalies discovered in our solar system. Mercury is our first planet from the Sun. It's a member of the terrestrial planets. Terra means Earth. Mercury is so dense that scientists believe that it has an iron core, occupying over 40% of its volume. We don't know for sure that this dense core is there, but we do know how dense the planet is. We know this because we've measured Mercury's gravitational pull. There's a lot of material packed into this small planet. According to evolution, Mercury cannot have a liquid core, so it can't have a magnetic field. Unfortunately, for the evolutionists, it does have a magnetic field. Here's what you're not being told about Mercury. Evolution says it can't be dense, but it is. Evolution says it can't have a magnetic field, but it does. Trying to rescue evolution from the facts just makes the problem worse. Mercury is a tiny planet, even smaller than some of the moons in our solar system, but it causes big problems for the evolutionary theory. 1 Corinthians 1:27 says, God hath chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise, and God hath chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things which are mighty. Venus is the most like Earth considering where it resides in our solar system. It's about the same size and shape as Earth is. This planet happens to be the hottest because its atmosphere is full of carbon dioxide. On the surface of Venus, you could expect temperatures up to 900 degrees Fahrenheit. Without its cloud cover, Venus looks like this. Venus's surface appears to be quite young. The surface is so young, in fact, that scientists have proposed that it used to be completely molten around 500 million years ago. It's been called our sister planet since it's about the same size and mass as the Earth, but there's some key differences that don't support the evolutionary claims. Venus doesn't have an electromagnetic field because its core is not molten. It also doesn't have any tectonic plates. It's made up of the same materials that make Earth, but it's very different. It doesn't have a moon. Later in this video, we'll talk about how the Earth supposedly got its moon. So here's what you aren't being told about Venus. Evolution says that it should be similar to Earth, but it has no magnetic field, no moon, and its crust appears to be very young and different than Earth's. Its surface is young and fresh. Venus is perfectly consistent with a solar system that's thousands of years old, not billions. Let's talk about the Earth as a planet. Does it match evolutionary theories? Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to match the evolutionary theory of an old solar system. Earth's magnetic field causes all sorts of problems for evolution. The Earth's magnetic field looks like there was a giant bar magnet set inside of our planet. It wraps around the Earth, protecting us from solar radiation and cosmic rays. Magnetic fields are supposedly generated from fluid motions inside of the planet. The Earth has an iron and nickel core. Both of these metals lose magnetic properties when heated. The strength of our magnetic field has been decreasing since we've measured it. This indicates that the Earth cannot be old, or the magnetic field would have been outrageously strong. No matter how the field is generated, it's a good thing that it's there. It seems like Earth was specially designed for us. The Earth is uniquely designed to be our home. There are other limiting factors that we could discuss. The Moon, for example, that orbits the Earth, is getting farther away from the Earth. So if you were to go back in time, it used to be closer, which would cause significant difficulties for developing life and organisms on the surface. If the land masses on Earth were perfectly smooth, there would be enough water to cover the entire Earth by 1.5 miles. Here's what you aren't being told about Earth. It's uniquely designed, its rotation period, axial tilt, and many other things. There's plenty of water, but evolution says there shouldn't be any. The magnetic field is young. Mars is the 4th planet from the Sun. Even though it's much smaller than Earth, it has a very dramatic terrain, and there's a lot of evidence that it used to have water on its surface in liquid form. We first landed a spacecraft on it in 1976. Since then, we've sent many other probes. We've learned a lot about the red planet. Here's some of the assumptions that evolutionists make. There used to be liquid water on Mars. That's impossible today. Since Mars's atmosphere is so thin, liquid water can't exist on its surface. Even though it's cold on Mars, a puddle of water would evaporate very quickly. Despite this, evolutionists predict that Mars used to have large oceans. Have you heard of panspermia? That's the idea that life may have began on Mars and then moved to Earth. But that idea is not supported by science. Liquid water is impossible on Mars today. That either means that Mars was created the way that it is, or that a large-scale cataclysm happened to Mars. Maybe it was hit by a large meteor. Evolutionists believe Mars used to be flooded with water. It's almost ironic how many catastrophes they invoke to save their theories, when evolutionary scientists require them to explain away anomalies in our solar system. Creation scientists are laughed at. Here's what you're not being told about Mars. Liquid water is not possible on Mars. Evolutionists speculate there was a global flood on Mars, but they reject the one that happened on Earth. Mars is a good example of wild speculations passed off as facts. Jupiter is sometimes called the king of the planets. It's the largest one in our solar system. It's bigger than Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Here is the Earth for reference. Jupiter has swirling clouds all over its surface. The Great Red Spot has been there for as long as we have been able to observe Jupiter. It's bigger than the entire Earth. This planet has large electrical storms all over its surface. Just like the other planets, Jupiter confounds evolutionary models of our solar system. The evolutionary model makes certain predictions about how fast the planets will spin. Jupiter exceeds these predictions by a lot. Jupiter is not only the biggest planet in the solar system, it is also spinning the fastest. It completes one rotation every 10 hours. This is impossible according to evolution. Evolutionary models predict Jupiter would lack certain elements: argon, krypton, xenon, nitrogen, and others. It turns out that Jupiter has lots of these elements. The evolutionary model requires Jupiter to have a large core. This is necessary for Jupiter to form in the first place, and it would take over 10 million years. It requires a core of at least 10 times the mass of the Earth, but its core is no bigger than 3 times the mass of the Earth. The probe couldn't even confirm that Jupiter has a core at all. Some speculate that it could take over 100 million years or more for Jupiter to accumulate so much material. Jupiter certainly confounds evolutionary models. The time available in evolutionary models is less than 5 million years. As of now, Jupiter has 97 moons orbiting it. Some of these moons are larger than Mercury. I'm going to talk about 4 of the largest moons. Their names from top left clockwise are Io, Europa, Callisto, and Ganymede. Ganymede is the largest of Jupiter's moons, and it's bigger than Venus. Ganymede has one of the most bizarre surfaces in our entire solar system. It's crisscrossed with patterns and grooved terrains. Some places are rough and rocky, other places are flat and smooth. It almost looked like somebody took a giant paintbrush and painted huge swipes across the surface. Ganymede confounds evolutionists when they try to explain how it formed without a creator. Evolutionary models say that Ganymede can't have a magnetic field, but when our probes arrived, we determined that it does. Ganymede doesn't match the evolutionary model at all. Callisto is one of the heaviest cratered objects in our solar system. Evolutionists believe that it has one of the oldest surfaces of any object, about 4 billion years old. Evolutionists ran into problems when they recognized that there is a lacking number of smaller craters to go with the big craters. Callisto doesn't match the evolutionary cratering model if it is billions of years old. Some of our pictures show new ice on the surface. This means that there's still erosion and geological activity going on. Evolutionary models say Callisto is old, cold, and dead. Apparently, that's not true. Europa is in some ways the opposite of Callisto. Callisto is the heaviest cratered object in our solar system, but Europa is the smoothest. Europa has very little terrain of any kind. The moon is covered with a layer of ice several miles thick. Some scientists believe that there is water beneath the ice, but that's far from finding evidence of life in our solar system. We've been able to study the craters on Europa very closely. Evolutionists like to use craters as a dating method for planets and moons. After all, the longer it's been sitting there, the more times it's been impacted by objects. However, the impact of one object can throw up debris and cause numerous other craters to appear. A study showed that 95% of small craters and a lot of the medium ones were formed in this way. This calls into question the entire dating method. After all, fewer impacts implies a shorter period of time. Remember how we thought Venus's surface looked very young, but the craters implied it was over 500 million years old? Using this dating method, now we know it's not true. This dating method is also used to support an old age for the Earth's moon, but we know that's not true too. Scientists admitted that the Europa results caused problems for the current accepted age of Earth's moon. Isn't it amazing that one moon of Jupiter can wreck evolutionary models of even our own moon? The last moon we're going to talk about is Io. Io is home to some truly fascinating geological formations. Io's surface is covered with volcanoes. Some of the spots you see on the surface here are volcanic. Over 400 volcanoes have been counted on Io, and at least 150 of them are active. The black spot you see here is a volcano named Loki. It's more powerful than all of the Earth's volcanoes combined. Volcanoes on Io can be extremely violent. We've seen volcanoes blast lava 180 miles into space. Some of the volcanoes shoot out lava at over 2,000 miles per hour. That's more than 10 times as fast as the most violent volcanoes on Earth. Io gives us fascinating insights on the long-age evolutionary theory. For example, Io puts out twice as much heat as the Earth does. Some of the heat is due to tidal flexing as the planet rotates and orbits around Jupiter. However, this does not account for all of its heat. If Io is old, the heat would have dissipated long ago. It indicates that Io is actually young and may still be cooling off from its formation. According to evolutionary theory, Io shouldn't have this many volcanoes. These volcanoes create another problem for the model of billions of years. We've measured the lavas coming from the volcanoes. There is an amazing amount of it. The Amirani volcano, which you see here, is flooding Io's surface with 100 cubic meters of lava per second. It's erupting like that continuously, and it's not even the biggest volcano on Io. For example, look at these before and after pictures of the Polana Padera. Between the time that these photos were taken, there was a massive eruption. The eruption ended up being about as big as the state of Nevada. These lava flows happen quickly. We've seen another volcano produce almost this much lava in 2 days. Has Io really been erupting like this for 4.5 billion years? If Io really was 4.5 billion years old, it would have recycled itself with its own volcanoes over 30 times. Lava on Earth can get up to 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. These temperatures seemed amazing until we examined Io, which get over 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Here's the problem for evolution. If Io really was billions of years old, these temperatures wouldn't be possible. These lava flows are also very dense. After the first few million years, Io should have formed a low-density crust, since all the heavier material sank to the bottom. Unfortunately for evolutionists, there are still high-density materials on the surface. Forget billions of years. Io apparently isn't even millions of years old. Here's what you aren't being told about Jupiter. According to evolution, Jupiter can't be spinning as fast as it is. According to evolution, Jupiter can't be made up of what it's made up of. According to evolution, there wasn't even enough time for Jupiter to form. Ganymede shouldn't have a magnetic field, but it does. Callisto shouldn't be geologically active, but it is. Europa shows that long-age crater counting methods are wrong, and Io looks very young. The next planet we'll talk about is Saturn. Saturn's rings are one of the most famous sights in all of astronomy. The rings are made up of millions of particles all orbiting Saturn. Some are small, like pieces of dust, and some are big rocks. They're mostly made up of ice and dirt. This picture shows Saturn's rings as the Cassini spacecraft moved from below the rings to above them. When you compare their width to their thickness, it's about as wide as San Francisco and about as thin as a piece of paper. There's one of Saturn's moons now. We'll talk about those later. There's 2 theories behind the origin of Saturn's rings. Either they were created, how they are with Saturn, or they evolved with our solar system. As you can see, there are spokes in Saturn's rings. Some of the rings are even braided. Nobody expected these features in Saturn's rings. Most of them are still a puzzle. It's as if somebody created them just to delight and fascinate us. Their origin is still unknown, as many astronomers will admit. Saturn defies evolutionary models in several ways. For one thing, its magnetic field doesn't match evolutionary predictions at all. Saturn has a highly symmetrical internal magnetic field, which can be created by a dynamo. This fact alone violates a scientific theorem about magnetic dynamos. This would be impossible if Saturn was billions of years old. There's no problem whatsoever if Saturn is only thousands of years old, however. But there's an even bigger problem that we need to discuss. A recent study took a closer look at the formation of Saturn and Jupiter. Remember that dust cloud that supposedly formed all the planets? Apparently, Jupiter and Saturn wouldn't be here today if that model was true. The models failed to explain the formation of gas giants in a satisfactory way. As a gas giant like this forms, it rapidly moves inward over thousands of years according to the models. They would be consumed by our star. This is referred to as the migration of a planet in the disk. Let's take a look at Enceladus, one of Saturn's moons. Our first close-up pictures of Enceladus were amazing, but nobody expected what would come next. When we started taking pictures from a different angle, we saw something unusual. Pictures revealed what looks like a geyser shooting out of the surface of Enceladus. This is it below Saturn's rings. This is a better picture of the geyser. We realized that this wasn't just a little spray. Here's a colorized picture of the geyser. Evolutionists were and still are surprised about how large this geyser is. As you might have expected, evolutionary models can't explain it. The problem is that Enceladus is supposed to be billions of years old. It's supposed to have cooled off from its formation eons ago. It's not supposed to have the energy to do any of this. When we looked at other moons of Saturn, we saw that they were much brighter than they were supposed to be. Apparently, Enceladus is spray painting them with ice. Evolutionary models say that Enceladus should be old, cold, and dead. Enceladus is none of those things. Enceladus is a great piece of evidence for a young solar system. Next, we'll be looking at Titan, another one of Saturn's moons. Titan happens to be Saturn's largest moon. Titan is an unusual moon. As you can see, it looks fuzzy because it has an atmosphere. Titan's atmosphere is mostly nitrogen, but it has methane mixed in. Sunlight breaks methane down into ethane, which means that there should be a large amount of ethane on the surface. We sent Cassini to investigate this moon equipped with a probe to measure amounts of methane and ethane in its atmosphere and on the surface. Let's assume that this moon does have a source of methane, and the ethane has accumulated on its surface over billions of years. Evolutionists predicted that there would be a large sea of ethane on its surface. However, when Cassini finally reached the moon, we discovered that those calculations were incorrect. Once it penetrated the haze and landed down, we determined that Titan's surface was actually very dry. All we found is some dark areas on the surface, mostly around the North Pole. These look like lake beds, and it appears that some of them are methane and ethane. However, they're still grossly inadequate to fulfill evolution's requirements. Titan doesn't look billions of years old. Titan looks quite young. Evolutionary theory still fails to explain away this moon. Before we leave Saturn, here is Janus and Epimetheus. These moons are referred to as the dancing moons of Saturn. One moon orbits Saturn on the inside while the other is on the outside. Every 4 years they switch, and the one on the outside comes to the inside. This has to be precisely balanced in order to work. So let's review. Here's what you're not being told about Saturn. Both Saturn and Jupiter cannot have formed according to the nebula theory. They face a migration problem and can only last millions of years during their formation. Saturn's magnetic field does not match evolutionary theories. Enceladus is young, Titan is young, and Saturn has dancing moons. Saturn tells us that our Creator is not only skilled, he appreciates beauty. Our next planet in order is Uranus. Since Uranus is so far away from Earth, we didn't know much about it until we sent the Voyager 2 spacecraft. Thanks to this project, we got a lot of new information about Uranus. You might think Uranus spins like all the other planets, but it doesn't. Here's some false color waves added to show you where its south pole is. It actually rolls around on its side like a ball. How could it form like this, you might ask? Well, the answer is, it didn't, at least according to evolutionists. Some people speculate that a comet hit Uranus. This comet would have had to have been as big as the Earth, but Uranus has an extremely circular orbit. It appears that no comet impact like this actually happened. It could have been created like this, just like the rest of our solar system. Many people are surprised to hear that Uranus actually has rings. Uranus also has 27 known moons. You can see some of them here. It's important to note that they also orbit around Uranus's equator, which is up and down. So where did these moons come from? They couldn't have formed before the collision because they wouldn't be orbiting where they are today. And they couldn't have formed after the collision because Uranus was supposedly already formed when the collision occurred. They couldn't have even formed during the collision because the orbits are too regular. They do not look like they were involved in any sort of collision like this. I think it's important that we recognize that no collision occurred, and Uranus was created just the way it is. Uranus causes another problem for evolution. Uranus is one of the Jovian planets. The other three all radiate energy. They all lose more energy than they absorb from the sun, but Uranus doesn't do this. Evolutionists also predicted that Uranus wouldn't have a magnetic field, but it does. Let's talk about Uranus's moon Miranda. This moon is made up of numerous types of terrains. It looks like it's a patchwork quilt put together by different pieces. How many different types of terrain can you identify here? There's long strips of rough terrain side by side with smooth terrain that's heavily cratered. Here's another example. Look at how dramatically the terrain changes from one section to another. It really does look like different pieces. Some sections look like someone painted it with a giant paintbrush. Other sections have very dramatic terrains, with canyons several miles deep. Let's take a closer look at this cliff. This cliff is about 6 miles high. It's almost impossible for anyone to come up with a satisfactory explanation as to why this moon is shaped the way it is. Wouldn't it be so much easier for astronomers to admit that these are created objects? So here's what you're not being told about Uranus. Evolution says it shouldn't be rotating sideways. Evolution says it shouldn't have a magnetic field. Evolution implies it should be radiating energy. Miranda is a mystery for evolutionary models. Last but not least on our journey is Neptune. The spot you see here on Neptune likes to move around. We've noticed several storms like this on Neptune. It takes light almost 7 hours to reach Neptune from our sun. Neptune, just like the other gas giants, has a swirling cloud of gas in its atmosphere. According to evolutionary models, Neptune is old, cold, and dead, but unfortunately for these models, Neptune doesn't look old, cold, or dead. Our space probes discovered that Neptune isn't as cold as evolutionists had predicted. Instead, the planet radiates energy into space, about twice the energy it receives from the sun. Neptune isn't dead either. It turns out Neptune is a violent, turbulent place. It has the strongest winds measured anywhere in our solar system. In 1989, Voyager 2 took this picture showing the Great Dark Spot. In 1994, the dark spot was gone. In 1995, a new one was discovered in a different location on Neptune. Neptune also confounds evolutionary theories with its magnetic field. Many of the magnetic fields in our solar system have falsified evolutionary models. According to models, it would have taken 10 billion years for Neptune to form. That's twice the age of our solar system. So here's what you're not being told about Neptune. It looks young, not billions of years old. Its magnetic field defies evolution. According to the model of 4.6 billion years, Neptune can't be there at all. Let's take a second to talk about TNOs, or trans-Neptunian objects. In case you were wondering about Pluto, it's also included in this category. TNOs are farther away than anything else in our solar system. If you were standing on one, our sun would just look like a bright star off in the distance. These chunks of rock and ice still have something to say about evolution and creation. First of all, where do TNOs come from? Supposedly, TNOs are leftovers from that big cloud of gas and dust that evolutionists believe in. They're asteroids that never quite formed into planets. The more we learn about TNOs, the less they look like they're billions of years old. Here's a small list of some trans-Neptunian objects. Scientists have discovered that many of the TNOs have fresh ice on them. The material apparently came from volcanic eruptions. But if these little rocks were billions of years old, they wouldn't be geologically active. That means they would have radiated their energy away eons ago. They wouldn't have any sources of eternal heat, and they certainly wouldn't get any from our sun. The temperatures out here are over 300 degrees below zero. Let's talk about another category of spectacular objects: comets. Many comets can sometimes be seen from Earth. What are comets made of? Well, they're big dirty snowballs flying through space. Comets are usually unexciting, but when they get close to the sun, they begin to melt. The gas streams out from the comet as it flies through space. This in turn creates the beautiful tail that we can see from Earth. As the comet passes by the sun, it loses material and gets smaller. Comets have caused a real challenge for evolutionary models. We see lots of comets today, but they can't have been there for billions of years. Comets can't last that long. Evolutionary models say that comets aren't being produced currently, but they need a new supply of comets. We'll start with the Oort cloud, named after the astronomer who first invented this idea. He figured that there must be a huge cloud of comet nuclei orbiting the sun a vast distance away. According to evolutionary models, it's impossible to see it because it's too far away. You just have to accept it on faith and believe that it exists. The evolutionary model says that comets originally formed in the TNO region. The Oort cloud is supposedly out even farther than that. Some scientists used to think that the comets migrated out into the Oort cloud after they formed, but they've since realized this is impossible. Short-period comets can't last very long. They can only go around the sun a number of times before they are destroyed. They could also be ejected. Most evolutionists today also believe in something called the Kuiper Belt. This would be a disk of comet nuclei orbiting outside of Neptune, in the TNO region we've been talking about. These have been sitting out there quietly for billions of years, but every once in a while one of them gets disturbed, moves in closer to the sun, and turns into a comet. This should explain how we still see comets today. However, we sent a deep impact spacecraft to crash a probe into a comet called Tempel-1 to see what we could learn about the comet's structure. The Stardust spacecraft also recently visited the Wild-2 comet. The probe actually flew through the comet's tail and collected material from it. Then it returned to Earth so we could study it. Evolutionists were shocked when they examined the material. Remember, in the evolutionist story, comets were formed in the outer edges of the solar system. The evolutionary model says that things that formed way out there must contain certain elements and must not contain certain other elements. The volatile material that evolutionists expected to find in the comet's tail were either rare or non-existent. On the other hand, some of the material was made of silicas, which evolutionary models say can't be there. In many ways, comets have turned out to be the exact opposite of what evolutionists predicted. The Hubble Space Telescope was used in a massive search for comet nuclei to confirm that they're actually there. The search was the biggest study that anyone had done in the TNO region. Evolutionists expected to find 85 comet nuclei in the region that they searched. They only found 3. This discovery was serious trouble for the idea of comet nuclei out there. The numbers indicate hundreds, even thousands of times less nuclei required to supply short-period comets. Here's what you aren't being told about comets and TNOs. The TNOs we see look young, not old. Comets contradict the evolutionary model. Short-period comets shouldn't be here if the solar system is really billions of years old. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this adventure. Please like, subscribe, and follow for more.